Welcome back to our webinar series, Reaching New Heights on Salesforce for Admissions. This is webinar 8, and the topic is integrating your CRM and student information system for admissions. My name is Lawrence Levy. I'm the president of Enrollment Rx. We've been a Salesforce partner since 2008, focused on recruitment and admissions solutions in higher education. I'm very pleased to be joined by my colleague, Barb Smith. Barb, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I am the Director of Integration Services at Enrollment Rx. I've been with the company for about 9 years now, and my sole focus is related to integration between your CRM and your student information systems. And we've branched out to lots of other things as well that are pretty exciting. I do come from higher ed, have a higher ed background in IT project management, as well as hands-on. And so really glad to be with you today.
Thanks, Barb. And at the risk of embarrassing Barb, I don't mind saying that, in my opinion, Barb is truly one of the most foremost thinkers in the world when it comes to integrating CRM and student information systems for recruitment and admissions for colleges and universities. I'm sure that nobody else has more than she does on those types of projects. So thanks again, Barb, for joining us. So we're really going to go through a bunch of slides here today and have a bit of a conversation about the topic of integration. But to set the agenda for the audience, so we want to talk about integration from a strategy and considerations perspective. We're going to talk about some of the important topics there and primarily focus on what we call importing third-party data. So in recruitment and admissions, we are all mindful of the different data sources that need to be managed regularly and imported regularly into the CRM system. So we're going to talk about that in a second. And then we're going to talk about the CRM and the student information system integration and that enterprise bi-directional integration between those two systems. What should that look like? What could that look like? What do we need to consider as part of that integration strategy? And then from a technology perspective, we want to evaluate the different options that we typically see, which is often bi-directional versus flat file data exchanges. So we'll talk about those different ecosystems and environments that we often find ourselves working inside of. And then certainly we'll cover some of the best practices and tips around implementation and what we think clients should expect and should plan to expect as part of their deployment. And then finally, of course, we will take questions. So with that, let me just flip to the next slide here. And so Barb, this is often for us where we would begin this kind of conversation, right? A college or university would come to us and they might find themselves, before we do our job, they might find themselves really in this kind of environment where their student information system is a big part of their recruitment and admissions activities. And then they also may have a legacy or existing CRM tool or CRM type technology over there on the right-hand side. Or they may not, for that matter. So we see both those scenarios as well initially, right? But the real emphasis is that their admissions team is in fact logging into their student information system to do some type of activities, normally process applications or make decisions on those applications. And so in those kinds of environments on the left-hand side, we can see that the SIS there might be data feeding into the SIS. There might be data like a third-party application, maybe a common application or a centralized application is being completed and then directly feeding into the student information system where the admissions staff are then responsible for managing that application and processing it and making a decision. Or, just for emphasis, right? A client might also be using on the right-hand side that CRM tool or CRM type technology where they could be collecting inquiry or maybe managing events and maybe empowering marketing communications and those kinds of drip campaigns as well, and collecting that kind of information, maybe even collecting applications in their CRM system as well. So while this image is showing the third-party app on the left, the common app may be feeding into the SIS. They might also have applications coming into the CRM from some other source, or maybe from the CRM itself or some other application system, right? And so all of that data could be coming into the CRM, but again, the emphasis that we would often see here is that their SIS is a big part as well of their admissions processing activities. And so clients like this would come to us, just to name names here, right? So very often a client might even have like their SIS maybe Banner or maybe something like that, Colleague, but they would still be in this kind of environment. And they would say, we are seeking to replace our CRM system. That's what is painful for us. That's not what's meeting our needs. We want to retain the SIS. This is our data flow that we want to retain. And we would like Enrollment Rx to replace the CRM piece on the right with a better tool that could better support this kind of environment. So for those kinds of situations, can you just describe in your experience, how do we address that? What do we typically encounter in those kinds of worlds?
Right. So in this scenario that Lawrence has laid out here, I mean, we do have what I would consider kind of a smaller set of our clients who do want to retain the SIS as their system of record for admissions. And so in that case, we do integration from the SIS to the CRM in various scenarios so that you can continue to communicate with the applicant, but you're going to still do decisions and things in your SIS. So again, I'm going to say that's not our normal MO. We're going to talk about kind of our preferred method where, the CRM becomes the system of record, but we do accommodate this. We do have clients that continue to build, bring in those third-party apps into the SIS because it's something grown into the SIS, either the import process or the application itself. So some of our PeopleSoft clients, some of our Colleague clients, they've already got things set up moving into their SIS. And so we will move data from the SIS out to the CRM is the primary way that data moves. So again, not our preferred. I think you can get a better experience, but if we can transition, then we can talk about kind of that flipping this model a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do that. Let's do that right now. But just to reemphasize, so you're saying that we could continue to support this model. We could replace the CRM with a better CRM and then continue to support this model. And we do have clients that do that, as you said, right? I mean, a lot of PeopleSoft clients would still maintain this type of model for a lot of reasons. So we understand. So in those kinds of circumstances, we would definitely continue to support this model, but still provide a better CRM environment. However, as you alluded to, as the company that thinks we have the RAD solution, we think that RAD, recruitment, admissions, and decisions, really belongs in the CRM system, right? That it doesn't belong in the student information system, ideally. Again, not every client does it that way for various reasons. But ideally, this is our preferred methodology, as I know you know, Barb. So we normally would explain to any college or university that in our opinion, the recruitment and admissions staff should never actually need to log into the student information system to even do their jobs. Why are they logging into the SIS to process applications and make decisions on applications? We think that all of that activity should actually occur in the CRM system. So the CRM system is that RAD system, that recruitment, admissions, and decision system, as we call it, where that staff is logging into the CRM. On the left-hand side, we still have those sources of data, those search lists, those test scores, those third-party apps, the common application and such that are feeding into the CRM system. But then on the right-hand side, we're only sending typically like admitted student data over to the SIS so that those students now can go on and do what they need to do as a student in the SIS. But the CRM is really where the recruitment and admission staff are able to accomplish the entirety of their jobs without, to be very extreme about it, in theory, not even needing to ever log into the SIS, to be very extreme about it, right, Barb? So I know that this is what we highly recommend for a lot of our clients, certainly for our Banner clients. But can you just talk about this methodology and why we consider this a better approach?
Sure, you definitely stole my thunder there, but
good at that only because you've taught me everything I say. But
right. So when you look at the sources coming in on the left, your search list, well, we do have many clients when they come to us where they're loading their search lists into their SIS. So they're creating IDs for those people that frankly, a large percentage of those don't actually ever become students at your institution, right? So in this case, let's put them into the CRM and nurture those leads, and only obviously move to the SIS those that have an intention of possibly attending your university, including test scores. Same way. A student says, hey, I'm going to send my scores to 10 different schools. Well, let's move them into the CRM. They can sit there and wait for your applicant to come out to your portal or through a third-party app and actually apply for admissions, and then they get connected together. So now that test score means something potentially for that new applicant. As Lawrence has talked about, those third-party apps, so those Common App, et cetera, we have clients where that's the majority of their applicants are coming in through Common App. Or, we're very good at loading that data into the CRM. Again, you're nurturing them, you're doing checklists, what do they need to complete in order to be admitted? We start to move those to your SIS at whatever status that you would require. So if you want them in your SIS once they've submitted an application so that you can start processing financial aid, that can happen sooner than maybe being admitted. We have some clients that say, well, we actually don't want them in the student information system until they're admitted. And so we can easily customize your integration to kind of fit with your flow. But the other thing that Lawrence alluded to, which I love to tell our new clients when we first start exploring kind of their requirements, is I literally will challenge them to either turn off access to their admissions folks to their SIS. And you think, wow, that's really bold. But we have clients where they literally, their admission staff no longer need to go to their SIS to do anything related to admissions. So our goal is always to build a system that can handle all of your business processes related to admissions. So do you need to place a hold on their account? They're not ready to register, say, in their SIS until they've, paid an enrollment deposit or something of that sort. I mean, that can all get triggered through the CRM. We can create a hold, we can remove the hold when the deposit has been paid, things of that nature, where literally we're creating students in your system, and that system of record changes to the SIS only once they've registered or the term has begun. All of their work can happen in the CRM. We love that. That's our goal. And we work very closely with you to determine, what are all those requirements. In this slide, you will see some data coming back, and we're going to kind of talk about what that data is coming back. But, the primary flow of data is from your CRM to your SIS.
Excellent. Yeah, Barbara, that's fantastic. So, and I know we're going to talk about this data exchange here between the CRM and the SIS in just a second. But if we do jump back here to the left, so these sources of data, these search lists, these test scores, these third-party applications that are feeding into the CRM system. So I know that this is something that we address as part of our Integration Rx solution, as it's called up here. So if we jump to the next slide, I want to just highlight this product that we have called Import Rx, and this is available, of course, on the Salesforce App Exchange. But Import Rx is a portion of our solution that we have delivered to really address the importing of those third-party data sources. So those common data sources like SAT, ACT, right, the Common App, GMAT, and so on. All of those kinds of data sources are what admissions departments and recruiting departments are needing to import into Salesforce. And then as part of that import, they need to transform and dedupe and, of course, distribute or create all of those related records in Salesforce speak across the entire system. So I know that we developed Import Rx to support this portion of that process, of that pond slide, that portion on the left of those data sources that are feeding into the system. We have this product to support that. But Barb, can you just describe a little bit more about this?
Yeah. So, I mean, this process of loading test scores, et cetera, is really something that, Enrollment Rx, we empower you to do some of that work on your own. my team in particular, we know how important this data is and that it gets used correctly when the data finally does get to a contact record and maybe your application and other related records. So we're very familiar with the needs of why you would import that data and what it would be used for. And we have people on our integration team with a lot of experience and expertise in this type of data. They have admissions backgrounds, so that's great. And so I find that we love working with you to help do this import. Integration Rx kind of takes it to another level where we would be able to automatically download data and be able to upload attachments and files and things of that sort along with your data. So let's say someone applies through an app, and of course they're getting, sending transcripts, letters of recommendation, other documents that are required out in an app. If you use Import Rx by itself, you obviously can, once Import Rx creates that application record, you can go to Common App, download those transcripts, find the correct record out in Salesforce, and upload those documents. But it is very much a manual process. So adding Integration Rx to your third-party imports, we also use Import Rx as our tool to get data into Salesforce. But on the back end, we can pick up those files automatically. So for Common App, there's an SDS site where we go pull down data on a regular basis. We pull down those images, so those transcripts, letters of recommendation. So we're pulling those down. You never have to touch them. We're uploading them. We upload them actually to the education history record that transcript is associated to. So we can do all of that logic behind the scenes with Integration Rx. And the other thing that we can do with that is we can do some of that transformation that you could do in Import Rx, but doing it in our integration tool is just much simpler a lot of times. It's very simple to orchestrate that, whether we're translating major codes from what it appears in Common App to a major code as it appears in Salesforce, countries, mapping from country codes to your country pick list, things of that sort. Again, those things can be done in Import Rx. Adding Integration Rx certainly helps alleviate that. And the other part that I, started to talk through really was our team, our experts, they know what questions to ask you. You're not exploring and trying to figure out what's the best method for doing each of these types of imports. But we love doing this kind of work for you as well. It plays into your entire system for sure.
So Barb, from a practical perspective though, because certainly an engineer like yourself and others like you are able to accomplish the type of data import that Import Rx is providing for our clients. And yet here at Enrollment Rx, we felt it necessary to go and build a technology on Salesforce to do this portion of it, right? That left-hand portion of the slide, of the pond slide of those data sources feeding into the system. So why would we go and build a technology, when in fact you already have access to a technology in Integration Rx that could do, as you said, a lot of the stuff that Import Rx is already doing? So what are the advantages of Import Rx that it gives to our colleges, university from a practical perspective in admissions that you could have done for them otherwise with Integration Rx, but we are actually recommending that they should use Import Rx for that procedure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I skipped over that one a little bit, but yes, what Import Rx gives us really, and the reason that we use it, even though to Lawrence's point, we would have no problem creating all the records that you needed on our own. What we like is that we are putting data into a central location. We call it the big table. If you work with us, you'll hear big table a lot. So we put the data there. So you will see essentially the raw data, other than a few things that we may have transformed for you. You will see it in this holding pond, basically, waiting for the import process to run, which is scheduled, but you can see the raw data. So you know exactly what data has come from these other sources. And you can see whether or not we found a duplicate. So maybe someone submitted an ACT score. One person, we go to look, we can't find anybody that matches based off of name, phone number, email, however we set up those dedupe rules. And it will automatically create somebody new, put them in an inquiry status. And then on a second one comes in and we say, hey, this person has already applied, or we already got them from an RFI form or something like that. And it will actually, merge those together, and you'll be able to decide what data would we overwrite. So if we already have an application for them, we're certainly not going to take some value on an ACT score that came in and overwrite what was on their application. So all of that gets configured in Import Rx, so you can see it. If we did it magically in Integration Rx, where you're not going to have that transparency. Yeah. So Import Rx makes it very transparent.
Right. And I know that when you say you can see it and you can resolve, and the you that we are referring to is really not an IT technical person, right? It's not from a composability perspective. At ERX, we always talk about empowering the operations team. And so we really, when we say the you, we mean those operational administrators who are responsible for or identify when SAT collects 5 new fields of data and you want to add that into your CRM system and you want to map that to your SIS system. All right, so where do we add that, and what fields are we mapping that to, and where does that data belong in those records, right? And that's something that we know, practically speaking, is something that the operations team has a much better insight into versus a developer or an engineer who would have to be told, hey, put these 5 fields on the application form and then map them to the SIS, right? So that's where it's much more empowering, we find, from a operations administration perspective, to be able to let this portion of the data management come in and be empowering, so that again, those operational admins can transform it, can dedupe it, and indeed decide where it should live inside of Salesforce, in which fields and on which objects. Is that correct, Barb?
Yeah, that's very much correct.
And again, I know that if we were doing that for them via our integration methodology, they would have less control over some of those things. They would have to call us to do that for them when those things change. So when the Common App comes out with 10 new fields of questions and they want to add that, instead of being able to do that themselves, they would have to call us for that kind of support, right?
Right, as part of their managed services, and we'll talk about that. So yeah, we definitely get involved. Common App has a cycle every year. They close down their previous cycle and spin up a new one, and we're right along there with our clients, making sure that if there's new data, what data they do want, and other updates perhaps we can leave behind and don't care about. But we work very closely with you year after year.
Great. So again, for the audience, I think we want to emphasize that what Import Rx was built for was for that left-hand side of that slide, the second pond slide, if I'm being specific, but it's those data sources that are feeding into the CRM system, right? That's what we're referring to, and Import Rx supports that. Now, Barb, you've alluded to it several times, and we have this note here down below, which says, but if you add Integration Rx, you get so much more. So there are some things that Import Rx does not do. And there are some things that if you add Integration Rx, we could just make so much better from an experience perspective. So can you describe those 3 bullet points down there?
Yeah, so I have alluded to it. Your images right now, your option, if you use Import Rx, which works great, you would be able to do your Common App. What would be manual for you is loading the data out to Salesforce. You would use a tool. Within Integration Rx, we take care of that for you. We go get whatever files that we can. Most of these sources do have a way for us to automatically pick up data. So we can retrieve those files for you. We get a zip file full of transcripts and things. We can deflate those and know based off of naming conventions exactly where those files go onto what record out in Salesforce. Takes all that manual process off of your staff. So obviously for you to do it, yeah, you've got to deflate that zip file. You've got to look at each file, figure out where it goes, and you can manually upload them, no problem, out into Salesforce. It's just time consuming. So Integration Rx, to me, it's just a big plus that we handle that for you. We'll hold on to files if Import Rx hasn't run yet, hasn't created that person or that application. We hold on to them and wait for that application to be created so that we can attach it. And again, those data transformations that are, can be done in Import Rx. It's just a lot easier to do some of those things in Integration Rx.
Sure. So I know that one of the things that we certainly want to make clear is that Import Rx distributes and transforms and deduplicates your data. So for files or attachments that might be also submitted as part of an application, like via the Common App as an example, that is something that with Integration Rx, we certainly would be able to include in that import process. But without Integration Rx, Import Rx doesn't support the upload of files, right? So that's for clarity, but that's an enhancement that we provide via integration. And then, as you say, Barb, the pre-configured automation. So we're often asked, right, do you have out-of-the-box integration with the Common App or with ACT or SAT? And so I think what you're saying there is that, yes, with Integration Rx, we have those pre-configured data transformations for these kinds of data sources. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I would say, so whereas we have, we obviously know how to do SAT, AP, we know how to do Common App, et cetera, just so that, our viewers are aware, we never say, if we're going to do this import for you, this is what you get, X. You get X, Y, and Z. We will work with you. We'll say, well, here's all the standard fields we would normally import. And maybe your institution needs, your member questions, I think they call them in Common App. You say, well, we collect more data on those centralized system or application systems. Can we include those? Well, of course you can. So we do have out of the box, and then we work with you to make sure we get exactly what data you need for your business process.
Right. And then just for anybody that might now be fully confused about the difference between Import Rx and Integration Rx as it pertains to this, so I think we would just want to point out that what we're saying is that for clients that only use Import Rx, they would be able to configure any of these data sources that they would like to, right? They can go to these data sources and any other data source, and they can configure Import Rx to work with any of these data sources. But we are saying for clients that also elect to adopt Integration Rx, then many of these data sources are already pre-configured. They don't have to go do that themselves. We've already done that for them. That's essentially what you're saying, right, Bob?
Yep, that's correct.
Great. All right, fantastic. Now, in addition to the import piece, which was those data sources, really what everybody I think has come here to see here today, and what we advertised the session to really be about is the integration with the student information system. How's the CRM and the SIS exchanging data bi-directionally, and what kind of data is the SIS and the CRM exchanging? And so for those conversations, we certainly talk about this kind of slide here. And to begin this, let's again frame this in the sense of ideal state, right? So if we showed those two different pond slides, we're talking here about the second pond slide, that ideal state pond slide, where all data is coming into the CRM, and then we're sending data from Salesforce, from the CRM over to the SIS. And we're also bringing some data back from the SIS into the CRM. And in those environments, we would talk clients through this kind of list, and we'd say, look, normally we're going to include things like, general person data, application data, previous high school or college data. We're going to send that from the CRM over to the SIS. You might also want to include things like family data or emergency contact data, and we can send that to the SIS. And then every client, we would expect we're going to bring back the SIS ID and the application number. And then some clients also may say, bring back their registration status or the university email as well, put that in the CRM system as well. So for those ideal state clients where the CRM becomes their system for recruitment and admissions, and the admission staff don't have to log into the SIS anymore to do anything, this is the kind of project that we would say would accomplish that. Is that correct, Barb?
Yep, I would agree.
Okay, and then can you just give us a little bit of insight into, these check boxes of things that are included versus optional? I know that we don't really insist on anything. These are guidelines, but we do very, very often see these as the final portions of a project. But can you just give us insight into why a person might optionally choose or not choose, or what kind of institution maybe would choose or not choose any of these particular options?
Yeah, I mean, so the ones with the check marks, we found that every integration is going to do, that type of integration to their SIS. Every once in a while, they may say, "Well, we don't accept test scores, so we're not doing test scores." So we use those hours, that have been allotted in our scope, to do something else that you might want or need. But our conversation with every new client, is, what does this list look like for you? Does this look sufficient? Are you collecting family data? We have, probably half of our schools collect family data and want that data in their SIS. Other schools may say, well, yeah, we collect family data, but we're going to use that data out in the CRM. We don't really need it in the SIS. So we have those kinds of conversations. So anything with the plus really is, well, these are other options of things that we do for many clients. Is that something that you would like us to add to our scope? So, supplemental, you'll notice that's kind of a catch-all for, we do a lot of holds where we're setting holds and releasing holds based on data out in the CRM, out in Salesforce. So we do kind of throw some things into there. The other thing we do throw into supplemental is we do have clients who sometimes get very creative with storing data that they're collecting during the admissions process that don't really have a home in their SIS, and they kind of make up places. I'm sure there's nobody on the call here that uses pieces of their SIS for things other than what it was intended for. But that is kind of where supplemental falls into there. I do want to mention real time. So Integration RX in general, we find that it's a much better practice to do frequent batch integrations. Now, when I say batch, I'm not talking about spitting out a file and somebody consumes the file. As a batch is more of a, hey, since the last time the batch process ran, what records have changed? What records in the CRM have maybe had their admission status updated from submitted app to now we're ready to admit them? Which ones have new transcripts come in and you've had a chance to process those? So some data has changed. And if you're running every half hour it says, okay, what's changed? Do we need to integrate that to your SIS? So we use a frequent batch process for almost every client. We do have some clients where they say as soon as an applicant kind of, completes their application, and we actually have some clients where we're actually looking even sooner before they've actually submitted their application. But let's say they submit their application and you want to immediately create them in the SIS and send them an email saying, welcome aboard, please come and register. So our community colleges, so that's a very normal process for them, that they want this to happen as soon as possible. So in those cases, at least when we do the matching, does that person already exist in my SIS, or are we creating a new person? That can happen on a real-time basis. So we immediately either find a match or we create a new person so that we can bring out your SIS ID. So you can immediately say, as long as your downstream systems are creating their user in your, in your SIS where they would register or do financial aid or something of that sort. As long as that process is running quickly, we use then real time to bring that data back to you to present to them. So real time, I would say, 10% of our clients will use real time to supplement. We still use your batch process, to just make sure we have a really reliable bi-directional integration between your CRM and your SIS.
Excellent. Great, Barb.
Mhm.
And then, Barb, we've emphasized that this is for those ideal state clients, but when we talk about SIS systems, so what kinds of systems have we worked with where this was the end result? I know we've done a lot of banner projects where this was the end result, right? So for banner clients, certainly this would be the kind of project we do, but what other SIS systems have we ended up with this as the result?
Yeah, so we do several varieties, flavors of Genzabar. We've done Campus Nexus, Colleague, via Ethos. We've done Colleague Ethos integrations. Let's see, I'm not thinking too clearly on kind of our other examples.
That's okay.
Power Campus, sorry. So quite a few, we've explored quite a few. The systems, and maybe this is your next question, the systems where we find that most clients will say, no, we're not going to do, this bi-directional directly to your database would be your Power Campus systems, some colleague systems, the Unidata versions. We're not typically allowed to write directly to those. So
okay, and PeopleSoft I know is also very common, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in those kinds of environments, for like a PeopleSoft client, or for those clients that really do say, look, we like the first pond slide better than the second pond slide, we're going to retain that data model, and our SIS is still going to be a part of our admissions process. So for those clients, then how would this slide change? How does this Salesforce to SIS here on the left, and how does this SIS to Salesforce on the right? And the fact that we have two columns here, how does that actually change?
Yeah, I mean, so what you see for certain on the left, that type of data for let's use the example of Power Campus, where an application has fed directly into Power Campus, but you want to use your CRM for follow-on work with as you're recruiting these. You want to get that student to actually come to your school. So pretty much everything on the left is certainly applicable, where you're going to send whatever data your admissions processing or your admissions recruiters would want to see. Somebody applied, went into PeopleSoft. Now you want as much data into Salesforce as you can so that you can have a productive conversation with them. You can target emails to them. So pretty much everything on the left would be included as that data is being moved out to the CRM, including registration status. So some of those things on the right-hand side, the email address, if you've already given them a university email address. Financial aid is one part that we didn't talk about is, we will bring out financial aid detail information. Have they completed a FAFSA? Or were they chosen for verification? We can also bring over, award data for financial aid. Are they getting scholarships, loans, et cetera? We also can bring over checklist information. So if you have a portal and you want the applicant to see kind of where they're at with that checklist, they may see your admissions checklist, you still need to submit a transcript, but they would also see, do they still need to complete a FAFSA or provide W-2s, et cetera? That's kind of data would be there as well. So in this scenario of that first pond slide where everything's living in your SIS, pretty much all of this data gets included as we integrate from your SIS out to Salesforce to make that system as useful as possible for your admissions folks.
So if I'm understanding you, what you're saying, what would change here on this slide is that instead of two lists, it would be one list. And instead of this saying Salesforce to SIS, it would actually just be SIS to Salesforce. It would all just be SIS to Salesforce, and this whole list could, in theory, be every item on this list, in theory, could be on there.
Yep, I would say yes.
So that's that data flow for those kinds of clients that would still be in that environment. Gotcha.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I mean, I will say, having seen both of those pond slides, and some of you can resonate with one or the other, we do have clients where we're actually doing both. So in the CRM, they have an admissions portal, maybe for, certain programs or international students. So you do want them applying, and that application is going into the CRM. So in that case, we're integrating from the CRM to the SIS. Well, in the meantime, they have some other, standard, whether it's Common App or, we've done like Apply Texas. In California, there's the CCC Apply for community colleges. All of that's already feeding into their SIS. And they've said, well, we don't want to, we want that to continue working that way, but we want that data in the CRM. So we do have those clients where we're doing both, basically both pond slides at the same time. And that really is not an issue either. They're separate populations. We treat the integration differently for both. So we basically done a double integration RX implementation, going both directions with different types of data.
And I think that's very important, right? Is that the world is not as one or two as we would like it to be. I mean, there are going to be shades of in between. And so there will be clients that, yeah, for some programs, it is the first pond slide, but for other maybe non-traditional programs or newly emerging, whatever, it might actually require the second version of the pond slide. And can we support both? And I think you've eloquently said, yes, we certainly can support both and have for some clients. So then for those clients, Barb, where we do encounter the two philosophies of bi-directional database to database integration versus not doing bi-directional database to database integration. So how do we address those two scenarios, and how do we certainly assist those clients that don't want to permit bi-directional database to database integration?
Yeah, so if I give kind of a little background here. So with Integration Rx, we have what I would call it a templated solution. So as we've talked, we've uncovered, both your pond slides, data moving different directions. We've also talked about, those that we are not able to write directly to the database. So like Power Campus or like PeopleSoft. So we have templates for each kind of these design patterns of integration that we might have. And so some clients, when we finish their project, they've got one pattern and it's CRM to SIS. Others, as I've alluded to, we're doing bi-directional, but different types of data moving in both directions. So their Integration Rx project has multiple designs in that code as well. So we drop in what we would consider whatever templates we think we need, and then we're configuring that for you. We spend a lot of time talking to you about your business process and modifying that to be exactly what you need, because everyone's needs are different based off of what data they need in which system and when. We're never going to tell you, oh no, this is the way we do it. This is what you bought. This is what you get. We're always working with you to do the best job that we can. So in this case, to the point of this slide, knowing that there are times where we cannot write directly to your database or query data directly from your database, we came up with, hard to know what words to use, but we came up with basic versus premier. So premier to us is that live database to database. We're using stored procedures in your, or we're using APIs if we can talk via a REST API. So that really is that center that Lawrence was showing in green. And then we have those cases where client says, nope, you can't have the keys to my kingdom. So what we will do for those clients, we call it basic. We will define with you, well, what data needs to be exported and how often and at what statuses. We export that data to a flat file. We put that flat file on an FTP server that you provide. You have to, you're involved with creating that import of that data into your SIS. And then you would turn around and create an export. So if you were going to admit people in your SIS, that would be included in that file that would come back to us, and then we're going to consume that data from your FTP. So as you can see, it just makes a nice big circle where we will orchestrate that handoff of data. So even for those clients that, in the second pond slide where your application comes into sales, we're going to send that data for the first time to your SIS by exporting a flat file, letting you consume it. You're going to create your new SIS ID, and it's going to come back on the next export out of your SIS. So very similar methodology to, the database to database. It just is delayed a little bit, and it takes a work on your side to make sure that you have something to import the data in whatever format we determine we need, and you will also write a process to export that data.
Yeah, that's great.
So we do have, and I will say, we have clients where we're using Premier for moving data, both the first pond slide and the second. We also have clients where we might be doing Premier writing to their SIS, but when we pull data from their SIS, we're actually using Basic. So we're actually combining, it really is all based off of what the client wants and needs. And so we're dropping in totally different templates based off of what methodology works for what data is moving where. Sounds very complicated, but we love it. We pick it apart. We talk to you. We pick it all apart and figure out the best way to do things.
Yeah, I think that it is complicated, no doubt about it, but you do make it look easy. But Barbara, I think that the real emphasis that we like to certainly highlight is that our team becomes responsible for managing this integration project, right? It's not just the initial implementation of it, but it's also the ongoing management of this project, so that in the future, when they make changes to the Salesforce or to their SIS, who do they actually have to rely on and call to make sure that nothing breaks in the integration? Does the admissions team have to worry about that? Or does their IT team have to worry about that? Or who is worrying about that?
Right. So for the life of your contract with Enrollment Rx, my team supports you related to the integration. So something goes wrong, a lot of times we'll know it before you will, first of all, because we have monitoring turned on and we kind of know what's going on a regular basis. So that support piece, we fix things that are broken. We also have what we would call managed services. So managed services, think about it as a bucket of hours that you can use on an annual basis to say, hey, guess what? We were doing TOEFL, now we want to do Duolingo. Managed services there, those hours can be used to do another import. So we talked about import early on. You may say, oh, we have new fields that we're bringing in from Common App, or we've asked on our new admissions application out at Salesforce, and we would like those integrated to our SI. Gender identity is kind of one that we've kind of cycled through all of our clients lately. But those kinds of requests, no more do you need to rely on your IT folks to even be involved. It really is a ticket out to our ticket system that says, hey, we're looking at adding this new functionality. Here are the new fields, or can you create us some new fields? We're going to start collecting this data. But we take care of that for you. So, a couple days, you'll hear from us. We'll start working through this process, and that work gets done for you fairly quickly. So it doesn't rely on IT. You don't need to worry about, those resource issues there. I have a full team that loves to try to serve our clients. The other piece that we do help with is, especially on that database to database integration, is, you have updates happening. You have upgrades going on in your SIS, and we work with you during that process to make sure that your test environments are ready to go, make sure that that's integrating with your sandbox, your Salesforce sandbox, and allow you to do your testing to make sure that your admissions process and our integration to your SIS still is working. So kind of take that fear out of, hey, we have a banner upgrade coming. What does that mean for us? We just are alongside you every step, just making sure that you're comfortable that your upgrade isn't going to break your integration between your CRM and your SIS.
It's outstanding, Barb. And Barb, as it pertains to the implementation, the initial implementation, so I know that for anyone who's attended our previous webinars, they understand our full solution is that whole recruitment admissions decision solution. Integration is just one portion of that. But for the entire solution, that whole RAD solution, as we call it, I know that we typically deployed in a 6-month project from start to finish, discovery, and then configuration, and then, of course, training for both admin users and general users. But for the portion of the project that is the integration piece, which we're very proud of at our company, right? It's unique for a company in our industry, we believe, to not just provide the software for recruitment and admissions, but to also perform the integration services. But when your team comes into a implementation project, we notice that they come in here actually towards the middle of the project, around week 9 or the middle of the project is really when the integration piece picks up. So the rest of the implementation team by that point has been doing a lot of work already, and then the integration piece picks up. So can you just give us insight into why that is and what's the thinking there?
Yeah, so there's really 2 components that I would say tie into that. One is we need your data model set up. We obviously can't start thinking about moving data until we know where that data is going to reside. So you've been through 9 weeks already of discovery. The implementation team from Enrollment Rx has started to configure your data model. We're actually consulting with them earlier. So we haven't maybe engaged with you yet, but we are already engaged with our implementation team. We know what the data model, what it's starting to look like. We may chime in with, hey, have you thought about this? Because we have an eye for, we know that this data eventually needs to end up in your SIS. So we are communicating with them and working through those things. The other thing you've already started having to do working through the implementation is you've started talking about business process and how your business processes inevitably need to change now in the new CRM. And again, what can we do more in the CRM and less in your SI, right? So you're going to starting to think about how things are going to change. And that really helps us when we start meeting with you, talking about integrating to your SIS, is you've already started processing, what might need to be different. You come with lots of questions of how is this going to work. And so we find that the earlier we start, the harder it is. You haven't gone down that path of thinking business process or data model yet. Really, that's why we kind of hit you a couple months in when you're primed and ready to start thinking about, okay, what's the next step with this data that we're collecting?
Right. All right, Barb, I know that we're running out of time. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to just remind everybody that we have one more session next week, next Wednesday, 12 o'clock Central, where we're going to be talking about implementation of the entire RAD solution. So Barb just gave us a little bit of a sneak peek into what the integration implementation could include and does include. But I'm going to be joined by our colleague, Kathy Ko-Gigante, our Director of Implementation, who's also going to describe the rest of that project. So that's next week. Please do join us then. And with that, I'm going to pause my screen now and check the question box. And in the few minutes we have remaining here, Barb, let's just see what questions we have. Okay, so here we have a question. And this question is, aside from the student information systems, what other enterprise systems have we integrated with? And that's actually a great question, Barb. And, sometimes in recruitment and admissions, it's applicable or not applicable, depending. But I think just from a technology enterprise integration perspective, maybe you can give some insight into that.
Yeah, so we're finding that, part of it is the fact that we're handling a lot of processes already. And we have clients that say, hey, we're used to working with you. We like the results. Can we take this a step further? So my team loves to explore new things. And so we do have some fun with, hey, yeah, let's take a look at what does it take to integrate to your learning management system. So we've started doing some learning management systems, especially for maybe those non-credit programs where somebody may use an experience where they're registering for individual classes and, CPR or basket weaving, whatever it might be, and they need them created in their LMS. So we've been doing some of that work. That's, those are kind of the major things. Front Rush, we've done some Front Rush integrations, which is used for your athletics. So just some of those types of things are just really fun for us to kind of not only fulfill a need on your end, but it's great for my developers too. We really enjoy that. Anything with a REST API, we're willing to give a try.
So that was going to be my last question actually here, Barb, which is, we do sometimes get this from schools. They'll say, look, you've said all of those fancy names that you've just said about all those other student information systems, but we have one that you haven't heard of that maybe we built ourselves or that it's just not popular. Can you integrate with that? And so for that situation, what would be the questions you would ask back to them? What would we
need? So if it's a newer SIS, it's, pretty sure they're going to have a REST API, and we are willing to dive into anything that has a REST API. For those that say, well, we built a homegrown system, and maybe it got built with a REST API component. If it doesn't, that's where we go with that basic rather than Premier. We go with the flat file. So we have done several homegrown SISs, and we've just accomplished our integration via the flat files.
Got it.
Yeah, great question.
All right. Well, with that, I want to thank you so much as always, Barb, and thank you, Audrey, as always, for everything. And to all of our attendees, thank you so much. And please do join us next week. These are recorded. They're on our website at enrollmentrx.com. Please check them out there. Thank you again, Barb. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.